Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit HRgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. Hello, listeners. This is your host today, Bill Banham. And joining me on this episode is my friend, David Hayden. David has a background in L&D, organizational design and development, recruitment, and lean engineering, spanning more years than he feels it should be. He has seen his profession move from traditional training functions to multi-digital approaches to learning and development. And he is passionate about how L&D addresses impact and transfer of learning and getting better at the data. David is also a director on the Learning Network board, along with myself, and I've had the pleasure to get to know him over the last few months. He currently works freelance on the associate books for a few different organizations and the marketing director for the Learning Network. David has contributed to CIPD content on L&D, including podcasts, research reports, fact sheets, and member learning resources. He was employed by the CIPD for just shy of 10 years, and he's the co-author of two books, Adjacent Learning with Steve George and Learning and Development Practices in the Workplace with Kathy Beavers and Andrew Ray. David is currently putting the finishing touches to the next edition of L&D Practice in the Workplace with Kathy, due for release in November 2025, and that's going to be the main focus of today's conversation. David, welcome to the HR Chat Show. How are you doing today?
Hello, Bill. Thanks for having me here today. I'm doing great. The sun's out today, so yeah, it's a good day.
Yes, we are recording this interview at the very end of March. The sun is shining. Spring is here. David and I are both in very good moods. David, beyond my reintroduction just a second ago, why don't you take a minute or two and fill our listeners in on anything I have missed? Tell them a bit about yourself, your career background, and what gets you up in the morning.
Oh, what gets me up in the morning? So one of the things I love about my job is you get to talk about learning with learning and development people. So it's just, days are filled with really enriching conversation. So you never know where the conversation is going to go. And one of the things I love about learning and development is there's always more to learn. And so, yeah, that keeps the spark going.
This episode of the HR Chat podcast is supported by My Staff Shop, the UK's only employee-owned employee benefit provider. We provide a range of competitive and flexible employee benefit solutions to help you improve your employee value proposition. From exclusive deals and discounts to help your people stretch their salaries, to effective reward and recognition programs, and a comprehensive health and well-being offering. We pride ourselves on our friendly and collaborative way of working, putting the interest of our clients at the heart of everything we do. Learn more at mystaffshop.com. Thanks, and now back to the HR Chat Show.
And that's what gets you up in the morning, the fact that you get all these wonderful conversations and you're learning new things every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. What gets me up in the morning is my alarm clock. Okay, so with the vast array, David, of L&D books on the market, why L&D Practice in the Workplace?
Okay, yeah, really good question. So Learning Development Practice in the Workplace is going to be the companion book for the CIPD Level 5 qualification. So its primary audience is those people who are studying that qualification to help them work through the standards and give some real kind of evidence-based practical insights to the qualification units. The other differentiator, it's looking at learning and development through a more of a positive lens. So some of the books that are on the marketplace around learning and development actually have quite a negative connotation of what's going on. And yes, kind of in some areas, there's a lot learning and development can do to make itself better. But actually, there's a lot of practitioners out there doing some really, really good stuff. quietly getting on with it. And what we've been able to do is showcase and highlight some of those individuals through case studies or mini contributions to the book.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRchat podcast. If you enjoy the audio content we produce, you'll love our articles on the HR Gazette. Learn more at HRgazette.com. And now, back to the show.
What makes this version different from the previous 4 editions? Why should people be legging it to try and get the 5th edition?
So I mentioned it was linked to the level 5 qualification of the CIPD. The previous 4 editions, which I got on board on the 4th edition, Cassie and Andrew asked me to join them on the 4th edition. The previous editions were all geared up to the old level 3 qualification. So this book has got a little bit more of a strategic lens. The previous books had that, but it was more geared up to the practical element of the learning cycle. The book split into 3 parts, and the first part is one of the areas where, if people have seen the earlier editions, they'll notice a big difference. So it looks at not only being a professional, not only kind of things like continuing professional development, but also it really emphasizes the organization context that learning and development is operating within. And so those areas have been really heightened in this edition. The second area is that traditional learning cycle. So looking at the things you'd expect: learning needs analysis, design, delivery, and evaluation, with a bit of coaching in there. It breaks down the formal and informal aspects. But what is interesting in this edition that we've been able to do and to explore, the 4th edition was written in, it's written in the winter of 2018, the spring of 2019, published late 2019. And a lot happened sort of early 2020 to change the world. So, and then 2022, there was a launch of ChatGPT. So we've been able to incorporate lessons learned from that shift to a lot of online learning in the early 2020, and just what AI has done for learning and development. So they're 2 big things that are very, very different as well. And then the third section is we've got the title of this edition is actually going to be Learning, Development, Practice in the Workplace, the Complete Guide, which put both Kathy and me in a state of nerves. It's like, oh, when I've said there's always more to learn, how can this be the complete guide? But what we've got as a third section, a much smaller section, is a list of further resources and spaces that people can explore beyond the realms of the qualification, that will take them to a number of different places depending on their interests. So that kind of, in a nutshell, is some of the big differences.
Okay, thank you. Let's just pick you up on one thing you mentioned there, and that's the impact of generative technologies. You mentioned ChatGPT as an example on the ways that people learn on the L&D profession. Without giving away everything in the book, David, can you break that down for us a bit more? What's changed due to the onset of AI?
So I think nearly every chapter around that learning cycle, we've included a section of where AI has impacted. So, for instance, learning needs analysis. We've got a case study in there where someone has used AI to do a big data mining set of a range of different professions. So the case study is an organisation that has a number of different professions working for it. So finance, purchasing, HR, and so on and so on. Some elements of social work as well. And the L&D manager there used ChatGPT to do a search of, look, what are the key skills that each of those professional bodies are advocating practitioners need. So instead of doing lots and lots of individual cold research, they were able to do use AI, harvest all that data and then work through that, so saving themselves loads and loads of time. So that's one aspect. Coaching and mentoring, we've got a chapter on coaching and mentoring, and the advances in coaching and AI we've obviously included in that. So there are a couple of tasters along the way where we've used that.
Okay, thank you. And if you want more details, you just have to buy the book when it comes out in November.
Absolutely.
David, what advice, David, would you have for someone entering into the world of L&D in 2025? And how do you think the book could help them?
Sure. So when I think to my first exposure in what is now called learning and development, my first exposure was with a group of youth training placements back in the late 80s and very early 90s. And it was predominantly delivering training. So, kind of for a big chunk of my career, delivering training, throwing content at people. And, now on reflection, having my fingers crossed behind my back that some of that content would land and people would do something with that content. In 2025, learning and development profession is much broader. There are a lot of different roles that you can you can build on to say you're a learning and development practitioner or even a learning and development professional. So it's not just about standing in front of a group of people sharing some content. You can be, of course, a coordinator. You can be a designer, an instructional designer. You can be a data analyst and looking at where data can feed into the learning needs analysis phase or where it can feed into the evaluation and impact phase. You can, of course, deliver training. You can do that remotely. You can do that with groups, or you can specialize in one of the digital technologies. So in the book, we talk about things like podcasts. We talk about e-portfolios. We talk about, kind of the infographics, all those kind of things, which can build up a degree of competence, of practice and professionalism that can add lots of variety to the role rather than just, you work in L&D, so you're a trainer.
Okay, so given some of the changes that you just mentioned,
Yeah.
how can this book remain current, remain relevant in, say, 3 years or maybe 10 years time? You mentioned the last edition was released back in 2019, and as you said, there a lot's changed since then. Is it even possible for this to be relevant in a few years' time?
Yeah, and that's something really, really conscious of. So one of the things that I'm very much aware is those people who fund themselves through their study or just kind of really keen to get hold of good quality material, but maybe out of date. So someone may be getting a very early edition of the book and see some things in there what we know are not quite credible now. So very conscious of, as we've written that, to get people who are reading it thinking around, actually, this was written in 2025. What's changed? So that first bit about what does it mean to be a professional, your continuing professional development, keeping yourself up to date, and being clear about the organisation context. All those really are leading up to the reader to say, look, you might be studying a qualification or you might be reading this cold, but actually, there will be more. There'll be stuff coming along that we possibly don't know about. So the book is written in a way that sets people up. This isn't just it. There's always going to be more to learn and more to build on. We talk about evidence base and keep the evidence base up to date. So just because it's in a book written in 2025 doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be up to date in 3-5 years' time. So it's like, I need to check. We're encouraging people to check and keep up to date beyond the lifespan of the book.
Okay, so as someone who is a successful author of several books, David, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, what are your tips for those who are thinking about undertaking in the process of writing their own book? You know, we all think that we've got a book in us. What are your tips for those people who want to make that a reality? Is it, for example, use ChatGPT can write it for you?
Well, you know, there might be a whole new niche of books that have been co-authored by ChatGPT. I'm just thinking about that. You know, kind of, there's one idea I've got for a future book, and it's like, could the author be David Hayden and ChatGPT, or even ChatGPT and David Hayden? You know, depending on that. But I think, you know, in terms of what advice I was getting, I've had two very different experiences. So the experience with learning development practice in the workplace is building on previous editions. So standing on the shoulders of the work that Kathy and Andrew did in the early editions, and then it's just been Kathy and myself updating this book. So we're not stuck with a blank sheet of paper. However, adjacent learning with Steve George, we did start from a blank sheet of paper when we did that. So two very different approaches. Adjacent learning actually started life as a series of blogs, and I think that helped both of us a lot in terms of not being overwhelmed with when we got the contract to from Kogan Page to write the book, and they said it was 75 to 80,000 words. It's like, whoa! But when we've got a number of blogs written already, each roughly of 1,000 to 1,500 words, we were able to follow that format. So one top tip is, don't be overwhelmed by the wording. Obviously, go for it. That's my top tip. If you think you've got a book in you, then, you know, kind of follow that train of thought. Break it down into a series of blog-like elements, and I think that keeps the reader interested as well. It kind of makes it a little bit more punchy. The other thing is, be prepared for an editor to do their job, because, you know, there is, I think we've got about 20,000 words that didn't make it to adjacent learning, which, you know, some of it was like, that's really good stuff. I wish that was in the book. And it's like, no, the editor was like, no, there's a reason why it's not in the book, David. So be prepared to be edited and let the editor do their job. There's a reason why they're the editor and not the author. And, you know, I would say, find a rhythm to doing the actual writing. So at the time we wrote that, I was still commuting a fair bit, so I utilized my train journey, which you know, then meant it didn't impact on other aspects of my life. But find a rhythm to it, and don't expect to have a retirement package with it, because the royalties are not huge. You definitely won't get a retirement package. If you're lucky, you might get an annual weekend away, if you're very lucky. But yeah, so yeah, them go for it, but, you know, healthy dose of realism along the way.
Okay, we are already coming towards the end of this particular conversation. Two more questions for you before we wrap up. Next one. I mentioned in the intro that you and I are both on the board of the Learning Network. So let's just have a bit of a shout out, give some love to the network for a moment. In 60 seconds or less, I'm going to challenge you, in 60 seconds or less, David, can you tell our listeners a bit about the Learning Network, what it does and how it helps the L&D profession?
Absolutely. So the Learning Network, it does what it says on the tin. It's there for members to connect with each other, and as directors of the network, we are responsible for making sure we're putting on events and circulating information that will help L&D practitioners connect and be better at their practice. All for 29 quid at the minute. Yeah.
Okay, you had many seconds to spare. Good work. And just finally for today, David, how can folks connect with you and learn more about what you get up to, and of course put in their pre-orders for this amazing book coming out in November?
Thank you. So pre-orders will be on Kogan Page at some point, but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can drop me a line at david@talentdelivers.co.uk, or find me on Blue Sky. I am by the time this podcast comes out, I aim to be more regular on Blue Sky. I'm just developing my Blue Sky strategy at this moment in time. So by the time podcast comes out, I should have got into a rhythm with that.
For me, my Blue Sky strategy is I always wear sunglasses. David, that just leaves me to say for today, thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill, for the opportunity. Enjoyed the conversation.
Listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.